5 most dangerous islands in the world. Snake Island, Brazil. The Snake Island of Keimada Grandi has an area of 43 hectares and rises 200 meters above sea level. It is covered with lush vegetation and is uninhabited. There are no hotels or restaurants, and only a lonely white lighthouse on the shore reminds that people once lived on the island. Brazilians are wary of Keimada Grandi and call it the Island of Death. Some are hesitant to even swim to its shores, let alone land on the island itself. Queimada Grandi is home to one of the most venomous snakes on the planet, the island botrops or spearheaded snake, which belongs to the family of vipers. The territory of the Snake Island of Keimada Grandi is literally swarming with reptiles, and their population reaches up to 5,000 individuals. It is noteworthy that spearhead snakes live only on this Brazilian island, that is, they are endemic. The Brazilian authorities gave this piece of land the status of a nature reserve and introduced an official ban on visiting the island for locals and tourists. However, even without this ban, there is no one who would dare to risk his life for the sake of new impressions and experience. Snake Island Queimada Grandi is considered one of the most unusual reserves of the planet, the history of which is covered with tragic legends and rumors. Because of the real threat to life and health, travelers are only brought to the shore, but are not dropped off on the island itself. In addition to tourist and pleasure boats, fishermen and divers can often be found near Queimada Grandi. Once a year, Brazilian military personnel land on the island to carry out maintenance work on the lighthouse. North Sentinel Island, India. North Sentinel Island is one of the most understudied islands on the planet. Beautiful, tropical, green, but inaccessible to modern man. You can get there, but it's extremely difficult to get out alive. No, there aren't thousands of poisonous snakes like on Queimada Grandi. It's just that the natives won't let you in. Yes, this island is inhabited by people who first shoot arrows at you and then shoot arrows at you again. Welcome to the Stone Age. The island was the only home for the local Sentinelese Aboriginal tribe. They're one of the so-called non-contact peoples of the world. That is, they completely reject any contact with the outside world and remain virtually untouched by modern civilization. According to scientists, the population of the island from 50 to 400 people. Moreover, they settled the island about 55,000 years ago. For thousands of years, the islanders did not let anyone get close to them. It is now impossible to accurately count the island's population. The dense forests and hostility of the inhabitants do not allow it. In fact, the Sentinelese are an endemic people. Any intervention from the outside can kill all the inhabitants, as they have no immunity to modern infections. The director of the Indian Anthropological Service, Triloknath Pandit, and his colleagues have been observing the islanders from afar for 20 years. In late 1990, Pandit began to frequently leave various gifts and coconuts on the shore. On January 4, 1991, the first recorded relatively peaceful contact with the islanders took place. On this day, a group of natives approached Pandit quite peacefully. One even climbed into the boat. It would seem that there was a fragile interaction, we should build on it. But not so. Pandit's contact is the only peaceful one so far. After him, the attacks continued as standard. Miyakejima Island, Japan. Miyakejima Island is located near the central island of Japan and is home to an active volcano that spewed poisonous gas for a month and forced more than 3,000 people to live in gas masks. The first settlers noticed a foul odor on the island and complained of malaise, but continued to settle on the volcanic land. After a short time on the island began to appear small villages, which grew into towns. But soon volcanic emissions became more frequent and every year the atmosphere of the island became unusable because of the abundance of sulfur gas. Poisoning by this gas was fatal. Even overalls and gas masks did not save. The last emission on July 14, 2000 forced all residents to urgently leave their homes and move to central Japan. It should be noted that the gas is a passive and unpleasant factor, but the main reason lies in the huge number of earthquakes and instability of the local landscape. More than 17,000 earthquakes were caused after the eruption in 2000. All buildings were completely destroyed and roads were flooded with magma from the volcano's vent. For 5 years the island was completely closed, until post-apocalyptic fans decided to look for something interesting on its outskirts. To their surprise, it turned out that modern gas masks are quite good at containing poisonous gas, and over the 5 years the concentration of sulfur has slightly decreased. Thus, residents began to return to their former homes or build new ones. The government sends specialists to establish the level of toxicity of the air and, having received the necessary information, gave the go-ahead for settlement. Placards and warning signs were immediately placed on the island. On every street you can meet a booth with filters for gas masks and the protection itself. Every month, residents are required to undergo medical health checks and will be evacuated from the island in case of danger. Wearing a gas mask is a mandatory procedure on the island, otherwise poisoning by poisonous vapors will be ensured, as the volcano can erupt at any second. Nevertheless, today the island has more than 2,800 inhabitants. The island's budget is based on tourists who come to see abandoned houses, cars and whole towns. Morgan Island, South Carolina. The mysterious Morgan Island is located off the coast of South Carolina. On it live about 5,000 individuals, but not human. It is teeming with monkeys. It is noteworthy that the island is not a tourist island, unlike the same Lombok, where there are piranhas, the last descendants of dragons. All to blame for the epidemic of herpes, which infects literally every representative of primates. We are not talking about the usual for humans herpes virus type 1, which causes the appearance of itchy blisters on the skin. Monkeys have their own variant of herpes macaquini alpha herpes virus 1, simply put herpes virus B. It was discovered in 1932 and to this day remains the cause of extinction of 70 to 80% of local populations. In primates, the infection manifests itself in the same way as the first type in humans. Blisters and unbearable itching appear. The colony of monkeys with hepatitis B was originally housed at the Caribbean Primate Research Center in La Parguera, Puerto Rico. But when several of the primates escaped, scientists recorded outbreaks of infections in local residents. The decision was made to isolate the macaques. In 1979, the authorities of South Carolina came to the aid of the island in the Caribbean Sea, offering as a place for research their uninhabited island, which was completely unsuitable for human habitation. The main purpose of saving the population of infected macaques was to conduct biomedical research. Therefore, the only people that can be found on Morgan today are scientists from the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. It is also known that in 2004, Monkey Island was incorporated into the National Estuarine Research Reserve System. Not surprisingly, it is impossible for the average tourist to get there, even for a fabulous amount of money. Revival Island between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. The island was ideally suited for fishing and hunting. Huge herds of saigas, steppe antelopes, grazed on the 216 square kilometers of shrubland, and 2 bays teemed with fish and waterfowl. This piece of land remained such a paradise for exactly 100 years, until the end of 1948, when the civilian population was evicted from the island due to the construction of a military biochemical test site. Since that time the island became inaccessible for hunters and fishermen. Microbiological weapons were tested on the island for 50 years on experimental animals, dogs, monkeys, rats, horses. Samples of preparations for biological tests were supplied to the island from all military biochemical laboratories of the USSR. In the spring of 1988, at the height of perestroika, Washington received intelligence that the USSR was producing anthrax 836, an anthrax agent, in violation of the Biological Weapons Convention. According to the New York Times, tons of anthrax accumulated in the USSR had to be destroyed to avoid a major international scandal. With the utmost secrecy, specialists at a military facility near Sverdlovsk loaded the anthrax into special stainless steel containers and filled them with bleach. Then the cargo was placed in 24 railroad cars and, having made its way through Russian and Kazakh territories, transported to Uralska. As a result, The containers were buried in 11 burial grounds on Vozrozhdeny Island. In 1992, Russian President Boris Yeltsin issued a decree to close the landfill.